The American War of Independence had begun. What events led to America's declaring independence from Great Britain? After the fighting at Lexington and Concord in April 1775, the King of England declared Massachusetts to be in a state of rebellion against Great Britain. This action did nothing to stop the insurrection. Militiamen throughout the New England colonies poured into Boston to join the fight against the Redcoats. By the time of the Battle of Bunker Hill in June, the militia was 15,000 strong. After the Battle of Bunker Hill, King George III officially declared all the colonies to be in the state of rebellion. This basically was a declaration of war against the colonies. Many Americans could not decide whether to remain loyal to the British Crown or to join the cause of the American patriots. Then in January of 1776, Thomas Paine released his revolutionary pamphlet, Common Sense. Paine argued that King George would never accept limits on his actions. In his pamphlet, Paine convinced many Americans that if they wanted a Republican government, they would have to rid themselves of British rule. Common Sense made an argument for a concept known as the rule of law. Under the rule of law, governmental authority is limited to carrying out the laws. People who work for the government have only the powers that the laws give them. As the Magna Carta had asserted in 1215, the rule of law limits even the powers of the king. Paine's writings helped cement the American public's mind the idea of a country united under the rule of law, free from the king's abuses of power. That spring, the colony of Virginia took the ultimate step. It formally declared independence from Great Britain. If the bid for independence was unsuccessful, the leaders of Virginia would be punished as traitors. Knowing this risk, would have been willing to declare independence. Please pause the video and answer the 3 questions based on this section. You need to highlight in the reading the answers and then write your answers in your notes. The Virginia Convention decided to try to win support from the other colonies. They wanted the Continental Congress to approve a unified Declaration of Independence that would apply to all 13 colonies. Richard Henry Lee, who represented Virginia in Congress, proposed such a resolution on June 7, 1776. Although the Revolutionary War had been going on for more than a year, there was some debate over Lee's proposal. The individual colonies could not agree on the best time to declare independence. Some representatives wanted to continue for reconciliation with the king, but it soon became clear that Lee's resolution would eventually be approved. In response, the Second Continental Congress appointed a committee to write a formal declaration that would announce to the world the colonists' argument for independence. This drafting committee, known as the Committee of Five, included John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Roger Sherman, Benjamin Franklin, and Robert Livingston. The committee's youngest member, Thomas Jefferson, was appointed to draft this document. The Second Continental Congress adjourned for 3 weeks and came together again at the beginning of July. On July 2, 1776, Congress approved Richard Henry Lee's resolution to declare independence from Great Britain. 2 days later, the Second Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. The document was officially entered into the Congressional Record on July 4, 1776, and signed by the President of the Second Continental Congress, John Hancock. How did the writings of John Locke influence ideas expressed in the Declaration of Independence? The ideas that Thomas Jefferson expressed in the Declaration of Independence were not new in 1776. John Locke, an English economic and political philosopher from the late 1600s, was one of the chief sources of these ideas. Locke's ideas, like those of Thomas Paine, were influenced by the social contract theory. A contract is an agreement in which people exchange promises. Locke believed that the social contract was a basic agreement by the people to accept the rule of government. Locke believed that a social contract would enable people to live together in peace. In his social contract theory, Locke stated that every man has the natural right to defend his life, health, liberty, or possessions. A natural right is a right that people have from birth simply because they are people. Locke said that natural rights come from God. These natural rights described by Locke influenced the unalienable rights Jefferson described in the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. According to Locke, people form governments in order to protect their rights. When people form government, they agree or consent to a set of rules that are intended to protect their rights. When entering into a social contract, then the people agree to be ruled by a government. In return, the government agrees to protect the natural rights of the people. For instance, government enacts and enforces laws against assault and theft, and it also raises an army to protect against invasion. Locke argued that without the consent of the people, government had no right to exist. If government fails to protect people's rights, it violates the agreement. Or if it uses powers that the people have not consented to, it violates the agreement. If government violates the agreement, the contract is broken and the deal is off. Please press pause in this video and highlight the answers to the 5 questions below, and then answer those 5 questions in a complete sentence in your notebook. The Declaration of Independence is organized into 4 parts: the introduction, the preamble, the list of grievances, and the resolution. The introduction. The introduction of the Declaration of Independence announces the document's purpose. It states that it will explain the reasons why the American colonies decided to separate from Great Britain. Preamble. The preamble sets forth the colonists' beliefs about the purpose of government and outlines the ideals of the new nation. List of grievances. This section explains in general terms why colonists thought they were justified in declaring independence. Then it supports these arguments with a list of specific complaints about the King of England. Resolution. The final section of the Declaration formally dissolves the union between Britain and the colonies and declares independence for the new country, the United States of America. Finally, the signers pledged loyalty to each other. The words of the Declaration of Independence are evidence of John Locke's influence on Jefferson's ideas about the government. In the opening, for example, the Declaration states, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The expression, truths are self-evident, means that there are certain facts that are so obvious that they do not need to be proved. According to the Declaration, 3 facts are self-evident. All men are created equal. All men have been given rights by their Creator. These rights are unalienable, meaning they cannot be taken away. The purpose of government is to protect individual rights, and governmental authority comes from the people." How did the Declaration of Independence justify rejecting the British government? The Declaration of Independence argues that when government abuses its power and ignores or interferes with people's natural rights, it is in effect breaking the social contract. When this happens, citizens have the right to form a new government that protects their rights. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having a direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. With these words, the Declaration argues that Great Britain's failure to protect the colonists' individual rights justified the colonists' attempt to create a new independent government. An usurpation is the seizure of something that rightly belongs to someone else. The bulk of the Declaration of Independence lists the ways in which the British government usurped the colonists' natural rights and therefore violated the social contract. The charges against King George included the following: refusing to make laws to address new problems, prohibiting local governments from making such laws, dissolving local governments, and removing elected officials and refusing to replace them, removing judges or withholding pay from judges who do not judge according to the king's wishes, maintaining standing armies in time of peace, holding fake trials in Britain on falsified charges, imprisoning people without trial by jury, excusing and absolving soldiers who commit violence against civilians, passing and collecting taxes with the input of the colonial representatives, also known as taxation without representation, capturing colonist sailors at sea and forcing them to serve in the British Navy, and cutting off trade with the rest of the world. Please press pause in this video and answer the 3 questions below by highlighting the answers in the text and then writing the answers in complete sentences in your notes. The final section. The Declaration also says that the colonists had made many appeals for justice and friendship to the king and to the British people. The colonists had tried for years to get Great Britain to appreciate their point of view. Now in July 1776, they decided there was nothing left to try. They had done all they could to remain part of Britain and failed. Now they would go their own way as free, independent states. The Declaration ends with the founders pledging their lives and their sacred honor to each other. They knew that their attempt to split from Britain required them to work together, to protect each other, and to trust each other. They knew that Britain would not let them go without a fight, that fighting had already started. Why is the Declaration of Independence an important historical document? Congress had several goals in issuing the Declaration of Independence. One was to send a message of unity to American citizens from Massachusetts to Georgia. After all, the former colonies needed each other. No single colony by itself would have been able to resist British control. Even reluctant colonists were needed to support the revolutionary cause. The young nation also sought to gain international support for its decision to declare independence. It desperately needed help in fighting a war against Great Britain with one of the wealthiest and most powerful nations on earth. To gain the support, Congress needed to make convincing argument to the world that the colonies had no choice but to break their long-standing bonds with the British. Finally, Congress sought to prove to its own citizens, to the King of England, and to the rest of the world that the United States was a credible part of the international community. Therefore, the Declaration claimed for the young nation the authority to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. The words of the Declaration of Independence had an impact far beyond the borders of the United States. The principles of government and justice expressed in the Declaration inspired other colonies and European countries to overthrow their oppressive governments. The words of Jefferson's Declaration of Independence were quoted by many, the Flemish as they declared independence from Austrian Empire in the 1790s, by Venezuelans as they declared independence from the Spanish Empire in the early 1800s, and by the Czechs as they declared independence during the First World War. In July of 1776, the Declaration's statements that all men are created equal did not apply to many groups of Americans. Throughout the United States, for example, voting rights were reserved for white male property owners. Native Americans faced the loss of their homelands to Western settlers. Finally, many of the document signers continued to support the institution of slavery. During the many decades following Congress's approval of the Declaration of Independence, much of American history has been defined by the struggles of African Americans, women, Native Americans, and other groups to realize the full meaning of Jefferson's words. Please stop the video, answer the 4 questions below by highlighting the answers in the text, and then writing a complete sentence using your answer.